Hey everyone, and welcome to another week of Mull It Over. This time, we turn our focus to one of the staple archetypes of the current meta, Secret Rogue. Though the version with Cult Neophyte remains the most popular, last week in GM saw the introduction of a version with Underbelly Fence. Whether you play Vendetta, and the amount of secrets may vary from list to list, but the core strength of the archetype lies in its value engine and the ability to build up huge minions. For this archetype, hardly any cards are auto-kept other than Pharaoh Cat, as you might want different parts of the deck depending on the matchup. Moreover, whether or not you have the coin greatly influences what cards you can afford to keep. For example, when Tice is on the play versus Demon Hunter, he tosses his Edwin Van Cleef because he already has a Pharaoh Cat into Neophyte curve and would be unlikely to get cheap activators for Edwin without the coin until much later. On the flip side, when Psycho is on coin in the same matchup, Psycho keeps Edwin and also commits to keeping Preparation to support the big Edwin game plan. Notably, he also tosses away his Questing Adventurer because you tend to only have the resources for one or the other between your big 3-drops in the early game. Against DH without Consume Magic in the list, and especially against Druid, going all in on one big minion early is often your best game plan. For Empanizado here, Backstab is the only toss because Druid will not play any small minions for him to target with it. If he picks up a secret or a 1-drop, he already has access to at least an 8/8 Edwin by turn 2, which is an instant game winner against Druid. You can't always hit the Edwin dream, but the next best thing is still a keep against Druid. Boston solo keeps Questing Adventurer and tosses everything else in search of zero-cost spells to support it. In other matchups, questing is a bit trickier to time because it's more fragile early on, and you instead hope to build it up. Casey demonstrates good timing against Yarless Priest that does not run Holy Smite or Penance. So questing goes up to 3/3 on turn 2, not being vulnerable to Wild Pyromancer yet. On turn 3, he puts it to 4/4 and just under Shadow Word Death range. And finally, on turn 4, he goes for the big push with Dirty Tricks as an insurance policy. Against Demon Hunter, Blitzchung kept questing and preparation together, but he's wise to hold off on questing on turn 3 even if he could get it up to 4/4 stats, because it would have been still within easy Marrow Slicer range for Tom. By waiting till turn 5 and clearing Tom's board simultaneously, he creates a much more persistent threat. In this matchup, every extra point of health is crucial to play better around Blade Dance, which is why it's a good spot for Tice to go for Ethereal Lackey here instead of Witchy Lackey. If he can discover Backstab, Preparation, or Shadow Step, he can push the questing even further out of Blade Dance range, which is a higher priority than evolving Evil Miscreant because a questing sticking for 2 turns can just decide the game. Against classes like Priest and Warrior that can reliably remove your big minions, you have to balance threat development with value generation. Shadow Jeweler Hanar is a 1-card mega value engine, so if you can coin it out and follow up with a secret, it's a backbreaker against these 2 classes that usually need a few more turns before they can remove it. For Switz against Highlander Priest, while the Hanar doesn't deal much damage in the early game, it lets him amass resources and force out Zim's best removal cards inefficiently until he eventually gets too much damage in. It's a similar story for Nalgidan versus Control Warrior. He prioritizes Hanar to the point where on turn 2 he even gives up Preparation, which he maybe would have wanted to pair with Edwin on turn 3, in order to maximize secret value and also drop Pharaoh Cat to play around Bladestorm. It's a different story when you're facing a deck as fast as Face Hunter though. You don't have the time to go for big value. Instead, you want a hand exactly like what ETC ends up with here. 1-drop on 1 and backstabs. Board presence is so important in the matchup that Flurry goes for Blackjack Stunner without Battlecry value, and it's spot on, so the hunter never gets a good freezing trap or pressure plate. Go for value trades and go wide like Tom does, and Face Hunter will often struggle to answer efficiently. Seasoned Secret Rogue players also carefully plan out their disruption cards, namely Plagiarize and Cult Neophyte. Timing these correctly can be devastating, especially against Control Priest and Tempo Mage, which often want to play many cards in a single turn. With Plagiarize, you can threaten to steal their entire combo, and with Neophyte, you can delay it altogether. For example, when Boston is up against a priest that hasn't even used the coin yet, he uses Plagiarize as insurance for his board full of low health minions. Boston knows Zim potentially wants to do a Wild Pyromancer combo to clear, but if he does, Boston gets tons of value in exchange, which is exactly what happens. Up against Tyler's Tempo Mage, Tom60229 goes for double Cult Neophyte on turn 4, and because Mage relies on spells to come back on board, he's reasonably certain that at least one of them will stick for the next turn. And when Tom sees the lackluster response from Tyler, he gets a decent read on an Apprentice combo in hand, so he Shadow Steps his Neophyte on turn 5. Paired with Jandis Barov for a huge push onto the board, he locks out Tyler's combo for another turn and still has Secret Passage in hand to follow up. As it happens, RDU made the same play against Psycho too, and while Psycho didn't quite have the big combo in hand yet, RDU's back-to-back Neophytes locked out even the top deck potential for Psycho to come back on board. And that's another Mull It Over in the books. As always, thank you for tuning in and enjoy playoffs this weekend.